You don't expect your Sunday to end with someone hauling your truck away in the middle of the night, and you really don't expect the person who set it up to smile at your mailbox the next morning like nothing happened. But that's how it started for me one bright afternoon, me washing dirt out of the wheel wells, and a woman from the neighborhood association telling me my ride was lowering property values. You could call it petty. You could call it bureaucratic. I learned to call it personal. My name is Jonah Mercer, and my wife Leah and I moved to Birchwood Ridge wanting quiet, in a yard where the dog could actually run without terrorizing 3 lawns. We weren't trying to cause trouble. I like my trucks old and honest. I keep my receipts, and Leah keeps cameras and a sense of timing that borders on obsessive. She says it's practical. I call it insurance. The first scene, the hook, is short and sharp. Me rinsing off the grill, the sun and the chrome, and Evelyn Cross walking up with a clipboard like she's about to perform a real estate exorcism. This isn't appropriate for the neighborhood, she says, voice prim and final. I laugh because calling a truck inappropriate sounds like an argument you should have at a garage, not on your own driveway. She doesn't laugh. She brings a police volunteer because theatrics make people forget how small the grievances are. We found out later that those little acts are never about the object. They are about control. Evelyn runs the HOA like a small kingdom committee meetings, whispered rules, an unquestioned sense that she knows what's right for everyone. She has a way of turning small annoyances into narratives. The community hums along, and she sets the tempo. For some people, that order is comforting. For others, it becomes a chokehold. So when the truck didn't show up one morning, it felt stupid and terrible all at once. You think, I just forgot where I put it. Then you watch the driveway camera and see the flatbed come in at 2 in the morning, lights low, a man in a jacket with a name tag that says Marino. The camera catches a hand slipping a tag under the wiper, not an HOA notice, a legal-looking tow notice. They hooked it up and left because the notice did its job. The job wasn't public safety. The job was erasure. I could have lost it on that night alone. But Leah and I are not dramatic fools. We keep track of things. Her little app pinged from the truck's AirTag. The video showed Marino fastening straps, whispering to a friend. The next morning I did the math, and the talking went to the tow yard. And that's where the story actually turned. It wasn't just a junkyard. The place smelled of oil and fear. Engines were gutted like open books. My truck was on a pad, hood up, panels off. Someone had started removing parts that made it worth more in pieces than as a whole. Why would someone take a truck just to strip it? Why would an HOA president engineer the thing? Those questions don't have simple answers, but they do have roots. I learned there are markets for parts, for identities, for VIN numbers swapped and cloned and sold. There's a small criminal economy that turns small community bullying into bigger profit. Evelyn's involvement was the part that made my blood go cold. It's one thing to be the sort of person who enforces rules. It's another to put your name on forged paperwork. The middle act, the pushback, is where we stopped being victims and started being inconvenient. Leah called in favors. A friend working in auto repossession gave us leads. We took the footage to a detective who credited us with being persistent and warned us about the bureaucratic drag. Persistence is ugly in courtrooms and beautiful in back alleys. It just depends on which day you ask for it. We traced a chain, a clone VIN on a car registered in another county, a tow ticket printed with the HOA printer's ink pattern, a ledger with handwriting that matched a volunteer's notes. The most cinematic part came when Leah's drone caught Evelyn leaving the clubhouse after hours, a folded paper in her hand. On replay, Evelyn walks like someone trained to move through small crowds without being noticed. The drone follows her to a mailbox and shows her slipping a paper under a wiper. The footage isn't the kind you use to ruin a reputation unless it's accurate, and it was accurate. We sat on that footage for a week, quietly building a case like you build a house. Foundation first, evidence second, a roof of stubbornness. There's a moment in the middle where you test the strength of people. We didn't rush to the police with claims. We took the evidence to the HOA meeting, a place where Evelyn thrived because performance in front of neighbors was her stage. Leah and I walked in like any other residents. And when the meeting started, we played the video. It's funny how a room full of neighbors can go silent, and silence is a heavier tool than any microphone. Evelyn's face didn't crack at first. She's the kind of person who believes the rules live where she puts them, and that gives you a certain cruelty. But when the video showed the tow notice and the hand with the HOA binder, and then the forensics that matched the clubhouse printer, the mask started to slip. You could see it tiny, human, the twitch of someone who believed they were untouchable. She tried to argue. She tried 100 little knives of words. The detective was waiting outside the room because evidence, when assembled, makes the theater of control look small and ridiculous. The tow yard search was worse than the meeting, quieter in ways that make your stomach drop. We found parts with serial numbers removed, a ledger with names and amounts, texts arranging pickups. The man named Marino had a history of short, cold interactions. The ledger had him listed as a facilitator. It felt like the neighborhood had been used as a farm for other people's greed, small injustices harvested into profit. People get comfortable with petty control because it's subtle. Crimes hide behind committee minutes and polite emails. We were lucky, sure. Leah's footage, the detective who took us seriously, a neighbor who decided to speak up. But luck is a story people tell to make their survival look accidental. The truth is work. We spent hours compiling timestamps, matching printer jets, cross-referencing registrations. It is tedious, it is infuriating, and it is honest work that, in the end, mattered. The confrontation is textbook cinematic, neighbors murmuring, the projector's light making everyone look a little guilty, Evelyn's mask sliding, and the detective stepping in. There's the arrest because evidence, when assembled with care, has teeth. There's the tow yard operators facing consequences, and there's the private aftermath of shame for people who thought themselves safe behind rules. There's also the humiliation, the public show of power reversed, and that is not the same as justice, but it's a start. What I want to make clear is that this wasn't a checklist of villainy and victory. It changed us. Leah and I lost trust in the idea that civility equals safety. We learned the difference between rules for everyone and rules for the few. I won't pretend there wasn't bitterness. There was. I will say, too, that the community had to reckon not just with Evelyn's fall, but with the years of tiny acquiescences that let her get there. People spoke that night in ways they'd been too polite to speak before. Some apologized, some defended, and some simply left the room. The final act doesn't tidy everything perfectly because stories like this don't end with a neat bow. The truck came home, patched and repaired, but you can tell it carries the memory like an old scar. Evelyn got charged. The tow yard operators faced consequences. Some neighbors wanted restitution, and others wanted a gentle folding back to normal. We chose to stay, because leaving felt like letting the problem win. The last shot in my head is me on the porch with Leah at dusk, coffee cooling, headlights down the street, the world quiet, but different, like a house that's been lived in and learned something. There's a question the video doesn't answer for me, and it's the question I leave you with. When does community stewardship become ownership of other people's lives? When does concern tip into control? And in a world where the rules are written by committees of humans who can be petty or cruel, what do we owe one another in terms of vigilance and mercy? If you stuck with me this long, tell me what you think. Was Evelyn a bully who took things too far, or a leader whose methods were twisted by circumstance? Do you think Leah and I crossed a line by exposing her, or did we do what any decent people should? Drop your thoughts. Tell me if your neighborhood ever had a brush with someone who took power like a hobby. Share this with someone who lives in an HOA or who thinks owning a truck is an act of rebellion. And if there's one thing I'd ask you to do, comment below.